Hello! A viewer requested to see some of my game's code, and so here I'm going to just have a quick video to show some of it off. I will begin with some MonoGame basics for those who have never seen it before, and then move on to topics a little more specific to my project. So let's take a look at the Game1 file. This is basically where the game begins. The Game1 file contains these four functions. Initialize and load content are both run at the beginning of your game project, while update and draw are continuously run throughout, multiple times a second. Update would be for where you would update things like your game's logic, check for input, and that sort of thing. While draw is where you just want to draw things where they are, you don't want to do any logic there. Of course, we can't have everything in a single file, so in this case I have the renderer being called to draw, and then the current scene is being called to update. I have a very simple interface that I use for a lot of things in my game that just give them the update and draw functions, basically because the responsibility is continuously passed down. It's a bit of a chain of,
"That's not my problem. It's yours."
So scenes would be things like the main menu scene or the battle scene. They don't draw the textures directly either, they have the individual sprites doing that themselves, as these sprites contain information like their position or what frame of their animation they're playing, etc. On top of scenes, there are also sub-scenes in my project. I have made it so you can only run one scene at a time, but you can run any number of sub-scenes on top of that, they just get drawn over. Sub-scenes would be things like the display for experience scanning, or like the level up screen, or the screen when you attack an enemy, that sort of thing. So this can all just be drawn on top of the battle scene. For various things in my project, I use a command pattern, which I find especially helpful for the turn-based nature of the game. The space command, it saves various pieces of information, like if it's finished, if it's triggered, and if it's blocking player control while it's being executed. So there's the execute function here, which can be overridden by the commands that inherit from this parent. I then have a command runner, which has a list of these commands, and the basics of how it works is that you can add to this list of commands either to the end or immediately next, and as the game is running, it will take the first command in the list, and if it has not been triggered, it will call its execute function. Once the command says it's finished, we will remove it from the list and move to the next command. This means that if you had like a unit that wanted to move and attack something, you would just add a move command and an attack command, and it would execute those in sequence. This is especially helpful for my project. As with its campaign editor, users might get creative and add these commands in very unexpected orders, and this allows me to handle any order essentially. So one of my goals is to make scripting passive effects in my game extremely simple. Here's an example of how some of them look. As you can see here, the shield wall buff begins by initializing an empty table, and then I add the onReceivedHit function to that table. OnReceivedHit is a name of an event trigger is what I'll call it. I then will insert this shield wall buff table into the passives table. Running things on the C# side or on the Lua side are both pretty fast, however jumping between them is less so. So limiting your jumps between is more efficient. In this case, I want to take those Lua code blocks that are relevant to the unit and put them together, and then initialize the passives and auras table at the very top. After each of those other Lua code blocks, I was inserting them into the passives table. Once I have this whole code block together, I run it all, and then I'm able to just pull the passives table to the C# side that is now populated. On the C# side, I can then iterate through this table, and I can grab all of those functions that are relevant to this current event trigger. I have added another bit of functionality here as well. I've made it so that if it finds a table for that event trigger, then it knows the first value is something I've set for its priority. Otherwise, it would just assume the priority is 0. Once we have all of those functions, we sort them by priority and run them in order. To make things even simpler, when I run the passives for an event trigger, I also insert some relevant variables to the Lua side to be played with. For example, in the onReceivedHit event trigger, I set the damage dealt so the scripter doesn't have to go looking for it. That was some of the code used in my game project. If there was anything specific you hope to see, let me know. I hope it was interesting for those into that sort of thing. Thanks for watching and have a great day.